Welcome to Casual Friday. Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is my weekly Casual Friday podcast. If you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, you can tap or mouse over the video playback area of the screen to reveal the chapter titles and starting points of each section. In this week's podcast, I have Tidbits. I have a Finish It February wrap-up, including a montage of all of the wonderful projects that you guys finished in this month. So let's get started. This first tidbit is a free online presentation called Knitting in Code, and it will be presented by Kristen Howard, who is at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. She has created a free knitting pattern to go along with this presentation. If you've been watching me for a while, you may remember that Kristen gave a presentation last year based on the colorful letters in illuminated manuscripts, and she created a free pattern for that presentation as well. She describes this pattern as a versatile pillow cover which features 4 pattern options and 3 seaming options, and is inspired by 2 aspects of wartime knitting: knitting espionage and relief knitting. You're warmly invited to learn more about the inspirations behind this pattern at the virtual event Knitting in Code, hosted by McGill Library on March 9th, 2022 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'll leave a link to register below. It is free to attend, but if you want to help support these kinds of programs, you can make a donation at the time that you register. But again, it is free otherwise. So I've signed up to attend the presentation, and I'm really looking forward to it. This next tidbit came to me in my email box. I got an email from Tanya Singer. I talked about her a little bit in couple of tidbits last year in conjunction with a project that she started and a story that she wrote called The Little Red Dress. And it was a hand knit dress that was knit by a Holocaust survivor for this little girl. And so she was telling the story of that little red dress. Well, Tanya tells me that she just released a new story and a pattern to go along with it. And this is for a blue V-neck sweater that she has called Dayenu. The pattern is based on a sweater that was knit by a Holocaust survivor for another Holocaust survivor. It's this bright blue, royal blue V-neck sweater with they call them bishop's sleeves. They're very puffy sleeves. And she wears it on the first night of Passover. So it's a contemporary pattern that is based on that original sweater that was knit for Helena. If you want to read the story about this project, or if you'd like to participate in the knit along, or if you'd like to buy the pattern either to knit it or in support of the project, you can do so. I'll leave all kinds of links down below so that you can join the Zoom knit along, or you can buy the pattern off Ravelry or PayHip. One of the things that Tanya says is that of the estimated 80,000 Holocaust survivors in the US, a third of them are living at or near the poverty line. So 20% of the pattern sales will be donated to an organization which provides emergency aid to survivors in need. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of the organization. It's all capital letters, so I don't know if it's an initialism or if it's an acronym. KAVOD, so it might be KAVOD or KVOD, not sure. But I'll leave links to all of those, including the Knitting Hope website, where you can read the story as well as register for the knit along if that's something that you're interested in. As many of you know, I have been working on a long-term project this past 3 years or so to knit a sweater from each decade from the 1890s to the 1990s. It's really for me to understand the evolution of the hand knit sweater, to see how it's changed in construction, in the techniques used, in how patterns are presented to the knitter. All of that, and the materials and tools that are used, all of that kind of thing. For the earliest sweaters, I have used digitized copies, scanned books. These are publications that are in the public domain. They've been scanned and they're available to look at for free. But I do have a lot of actual physical knitting books that are vintage and antique. You can see quite a few of them right here. There has never been any overlap, though, between the patterns that I have used for the project and the patterns that are in the books that I own. And I started thinking that I really would like to see if I could get physical copies of the books that presented the patterns that I actually used. And I was able to find the one from the 1890s to get a physical copy of it. So I want to show it to you in the overhead. So this is the book that I got. It's part of the Metropolitan Art series that says that it's issued quarterly. This is volume 3, number 2, published May 1897. When I originally saw that, I didn't understand. I thought, oh, were there other knitting books that they published? They published The Art of Knitting back in 1892, but other than that, I thought this was the only one. It turns out, when you look on the inside cover, the Metropolitan Art series involves a lot of different types of crafts: drawn work, crocheting, lace making, knitting, etc., etc. So that's what that's referring to in terms of the Metropolitan Art series. One of the similarities, it has a list of abbreviations so that you can read the instructions and know what the abbreviations mean. Some of those abbreviations are different than what we have today, but they're defined here, which is what you want. N means narrow, and then they have knit two together here, and they say the same as N. So if they use N, that just means do a knit two together. They also have a knit one or slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over, which they call slip and bind. But those are the main abbreviations. As I was flipping through this book, I noticed that there was an X in many of these lines. And I thought, well, what the heck does X mean in this pattern? And so I looked at the beginning, and they say to make the instructions more simple, X will stand for, and then they give you what the sequence of stitches is. So yarn over twice, purl two together, yarn over, purl two together, yarn over, purl two together. So anytime you see X in these instructions, that's what you would substitute instead. But it is a lot of writing to try to wade through. This is a situation where a chart really comes in handy. So there are similarities, but there are differences. During the process of working on my long-term project of knitting a sweater from each decade, from the 1890s to the 1990s, I have often felt like kind of a weirdo with a very specific obsession. Like, this isn't something that other people seem to do. There certainly are knitters who are interested in vintage knitting, but nobody seems to have this particular weird obsession. So I think of it as a very solitary thing. A lot of it's been happening during COVID. 2 of the 3 years I've been working on this project has been during the pandemic. I spend most of my days in my office alone, either working on a knitting project or researching or whatever, but most of it's done here in isolation. So it's always fabulous to me when I find somebody whose obsession overlaps mine in some way. We're not doing the same thing, but there's some kind of commonality. Last summer, I told you guys in various tidbits about a podcast called Yarns at Yinhu, and she was doing an 8-part series where she was interviewing a woman who had done her PhD on Elizabeth Zimmerman. So it was fascinating to learn so many things about her, but also to learn what Elizabeth Zimmerman's influences were. She was really about finding like wool for knitters, not the synthetic stuff that was widely available and almost becoming exclusively available in the 50s and 60s. So she started importing wool so that she could have wool and she could sell it to other people who wanted to have wool. She was always on the lookout for books that helped knitters figure out how to do things on their own. So one of the books that came up in this interview series was a book called Number Knitting. And when she talked about it, I immediately went online to find a copy of it. It was expensive. It wasn't as expensive as they warned that it would be in the podcast. But I think it probably has shot up since then because more and more knitters are finding out about it. So I got a copy of this book. What's so interesting about it was that it really seems to be the first book that understood and explained the geometric relationship that garter stitch has in terms of the ridges that you create by working 2 rows and the stitches that you create. So that you can create 90-degree angles, 45-degree angles, whatever, and you can take advantage of the stitch to ridge ratio and make some really interesting things. And Elizabeth Zimmerman certainly did that with garter stitch. She did the baby surprise jacket. She had the Tom Ton jacket. She did a lot of things with garter stitch. And her influence was clearly this book. So that was fascinating enough just to have that intersection. Somebody in the Ravelry group told me about a woman who had taken this book and had digitized it. It's in the public domain. It's no longer in copyright. She had created a PDF of it and she was improving the charts and it was available on her Etsy shop. So I went and took a look at it and it's much cheaper than what you would get if you tried to get a physical copy of it. So her name is Kelly from Knitswag and I've talked about her in the past. Well, since that whole podcast series and people learning more about number knitting and then learning more about what Kelly's been trying to do, and she's been working in isolation for a long time as well. But there's been this renewed interest, and so she's got a YouTube channel now, and she's kind of introducing it. She's got test knitters to go through all of the different projects in here, and she's working on explaining how to create these in different sizes, because as so many things were in this era, they're one size. How do you change that? And so it's just an interesting intersection to me of what she's interested in and what I'm interested in. Well, she wanted to send me a little something a couple of weeks ago because she has this Etsy shop where she does like mugs and even rolling suitcases that have knitting designs on the sides of them. She's also a graphic designer, which is why she's so good at doing all of the recharting and reimagining the number knitting book. So she wanted to send me something, and what she sent me was, it's a little cube of these Post-it type of pieces of paper, because she figured that I would be like her in that when I'm going through all of these books, I want to put a little sticky in there and write some notes on them like that. And she's right. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kelly. I love this. I love anything that's got knitting related things on the side of it and that is useful as well. So I'll leave a link down to her Etsy shop in case you guys want to check out either the number knitting book and also I'll leave a link to her YouTube channel where she's got some videos about number knitting and to her Ravelry group as well if you're interested in those. This tidbit came to me from my daughter Nina. She sent this to me in December. She and her partner Sam had been here in the US for an extended stay last fall. And they spent most of their time staying in the casita in my mother-in-law's property down in Santa Fe. The extended family had all gone to Thanksgiving together, and my mother-in-law had these amazing candles on the table. I'd never seen anything like that. There were these long white tapers, and then near the base, there were these they look like roses, but they were made from wax. They were wax. They were very delicate. So beautiful. I'd never seen anything like that. Well, in December, Nina sent me a photo of some candles that looked just like that, but they were red, that my mother-in-law had ordered for Thanksgiving, but they didn't come in time, and that's why she'd used the white ones instead. But what was included in the box of the candles was a little card that said that these candles were traditional to burn when a couple agreed to get married. And so my mother-in-law gave them to Nina and Sam because they had mentioned that they were planning on getting engaged in February. So she gave those candles to them. There was an article in Vogue magazine about this woman who started this candle making business. This is actually a really traditional process, but it had kind of gone by the wayside by the 1970s, because people who made these traditional candles didn't get paid for it. They were mostly doing it for the church, and the church didn't pay them. They just did a barter system where they maybe gave them some food instead. So people found other ways of getting by because that wasn't giving them any money. Well, this woman, Doña Viviana Alaves, she was born around in the late 1940s, I believe. She was orphaned when she was 8, and she was raised by her grandmother, who made these kinds of candles. So she was around her grandmother learning this at a very young age, how to make these candles. And then in the 1970s, when she was a mother, she was widowed. So she had 2 little kids, and she had no husband, no income. And so she thought about the candle making that she had learned from her grandmother, and she thought maybe she could do that and use that and then sell those and make that as a way to make money. So she was able to do that, and then she decided to extend who she was teaching this process to. Instead of, it was traditionally taught from mother to daughter to granddaughter like that. It was kept in the family, and you had your heirloom molds, and that's how you did it. And so she thought, I'm going to teach anybody who wants to learn how to do this. Well, the town elders didn't like that, and they confiscated her molds, or they confiscated most of them. So one of the things that they say in the article is, in the old days in the candle making community, the women did the artistic labor, but things were run by the men. And for this reason, Doña Viviana was even more marginalized for daring to express her ideas and to commercialize her work. So she did still have a few of the heirloom molds left, and then she looked around at flower petals and different things in nature and created more molds. This article that I am linking to has beautiful photographs, but also has video clips that show you how these things are made. In February, we got a little video from Nina and Sam.
Hiya! Hiya!
Finished in February, ended on Monday. And I thank all of you who have participated in it. I feel good about what I was able to accomplish in February. I did finish all my knitting goals. I re-knit 2 sweaters for my 1960s sweater. I knit the second knee sock of a pair, and I repaired a sweater by putting some elbow patches on them. I did not have as much luck with my spinning. First of all, I'd forgotten that I'd wanted to finish this breed study, that was part of it. As soon as I finished the second sleeve, I finished all of my Finish It February knitting on Sunday. I brought my spinning wheel over, and I started where I'd left off in November, spinning the T-sweater wool, and my wheel was making a horrible squeaky sound. And so I thought, oh, must need some oil in the flyer. I have a Lendrum double treadle. It doesn't require oiling in various parts the way other spinning wheels do. But sometimes if the bobbin is just a little dry on the flyer, it can make a little squeaky sound. So I oiled it, and I started spinning, and it seemed like things were going along. But anytime I moved the yarn guide so that I was spinning on a different part of the bare bobbin, it would start squeaking again. And I was trying all kinds of things. Then the next day, I sat down to ply the yarn that I'd finished spinning, and the squeak was gone. And I thought, oh, good, the oil actually finally did its thing. So I finished plying. That was with a nice silent wheel. Put a new bobbin in and started spinning the next breed, which is Texel, and it started squeaking again. And I realized, oh, when I'm spinning, the wheel is going clockwise, but when I'm plying, it's going counterclockwise. And for some reason, there's a squeak only in one direction. So I'm still trying to figure that out, and trying to figure out if something I can fix or not. And if it's not, then how I'm going to get it fixed. I don't know. But otherwise, I got all the knitting done that I wanted, and I'll be able to start up my 1940s project, the second half of the 1940s project. I'll be starting up this weekend, which I'm excited about. Didn't do much knitting this week. I did spend a lot of time putting together the montage of Finish It February based on all of the projects that people finished and posted in my Ravelry group. I think last year there were about 100 photos and the montage was about 8 minutes long. This year there were more like 220 photos and the montage is about 17, 18 minutes long, something like that. That is really on the long side of a montage, I think. But I did promise to put everybody's photos in, so I did do that. I arranged them differently than I did last year. Last year I did it by week, like here are all the things that were done the first week, here are the things that were done the second week. This year I decided to do it, group them by type of project. And so that way, if you are really interested in sweaters and want to see what people did, you can jump right to that section. Or if you're interested in seeing the things that people fixed, you can look at just that section. So, so I've got the Fix It February, which is either repairs to things or I didn't like the way this fit, so I lengthened the sleeves, or I did this, or I did that. So some of them were fixing it in different ways. And then we've got things for the heads and shoulders, like hats and shawls. And then we've got things for the feet, so socks. And there were only a couple of pairs of mittens, so I put those in the miscellaneous section. And then there's also a section on blankets. So in the future, it probably won't be possible for me to put every single photo in the montage. It's just too much for somebody to watch and it's too much for somebody to edit. I'll leave a link to the Ravelry thread where these photos came from. So if you see something in particular that you really love and you want to know what that pattern is or what the yarn was that they used, you will be able to search on their Ravelry name within that thread, find that post and click on it, and it will take you to the Ravelry project page, and then you'll find all of the information about the yarn and the pattern and that sort of thing. So I think in the future, like next year, there will probably be a no chat thread that will be all photos, but I'll probably take a subset of all of the photos in order to create the montage, just because it will be much too big next year. My next steps for projects are to finish that 1960s sweater. I need to do the seaming and weave in the ends, and I also have to put in some grosgrain ribbon and sew in the buttons. So one of the things I'm planning for this month, I have a birthday coming up at the end of the month, and I'm planning on upgrading the sewing machine that I have to a new model. And so one of the things that this new sewing machine will have is a one-step buttonhole rather than having to do a four-step buttonhole. So I am planning on having that be one of the first things I do with my new sewing machine. So that will be happening later in the month. And I did mention months and months ago when I knit the sleeves the first two times that I was going to be doing grosgrain, and I did promise that I would do a video on that. So that will happen sometime in the next few months. I will do a video on how do you do grosgrain ribbon for a button band. And then of course for actual knitting, I will be starting up my 1940s project. Once again, do the second half of the 1940s project. So those are the things that are coming up. So if some of you have a lot of excess energy after Finish It February and are looking for something else to do, apparently it is Mend It March. And there's even a hashtag to go along with it on Instagram if that's something you do, hashtag Mend March. And so if you have anything that you need to fix, whether it's clothes or knitted items, and you want to use this momentum that you've got going from Finish It February to work on other sorts of mending projects, you might be interested in doing that. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so. And if you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.